We're going to turn now to country music singer-songwriter Toby Keith, passing away overnight at just 62 years old.
When news broke of Toby Keith's passing, the entire music world fell silent. Fans who had grown up listening to his voice, his songs, and his words of American pride were left devastated. For decades, Toby Keith wasn't just a country singer. He was an icon, a symbol of resilience, a man who represented strength and honesty in every note he sang. His music was more than entertainment. It was a reflection of his soul, his beliefs, and his love for life. But as the tributes poured in and millions of fans shared their memories, a story began to surface that few were prepared for. It wasn't about the bright lights of Nashville or the roaring stadium crowds. It wasn't about his platinum albums or his awards. It was about a place that meant something deeper to Toby, a place where he spent hours of his private life, away from the cameras, away from the interviews, away from the fame. That place was his garage. To many, a garage is just a space for tools, old boxes, maybe a car or two. But Toby Keith's garage? It was something far more personal, something almost sacred. And after his death, when his family finally stepped inside, what they discovered left them in tears. And it will leave you absolutely speechless. You see, Toby's garage wasn't just a collection of material things. It was a timeline of his journey, a silent museum of the man he was when no one else was looking. Every object, every detail, every hidden corner revealed a story, stories that even his closest fans never knew about. From the humble beginnings of his childhood to the peak of his career, from the battles he faced with his health to the secret moments of kindness he never talked about publicly, all of it was hidden within those walls. So tonight, we're going to open that garage with you. We're going to walk through what his family found, piece by piece, and uncover the hidden side of Toby Keith's life that the world never got to see. Because sometimes, the greatest legacy isn't found on stage under the spotlight. It's hidden in the quiet corners of home, in the places where a man keeps his truest self. And Toby Keith's garage was exactly that. When Toby Keith's family opened the heavy garage doors, they were immediately met with the faint smell of oil, leather, and wood, the kind of smell that only comes from years of personal projects and treasured belongings kept safe. At first glance, it didn't look like the garage of a celebrity worth millions. There weren't gold-plated walls or flashy cars lined up like a showroom. Instead, it felt humble, lived in, and deeply personal, just like Toby himself. Against the far wall stood a row of old guitars, some scratched and worn from years of use. These weren't the polished instruments he played on stage under the bright lights. These were the ones he strummed during quiet nights, writing songs that never made it to the radio. One guitar still had handwritten lyrics taped to its body, words that no one outside his family had ever read. His wife Loretta reportedly broke down in tears when she saw it, realizing it was a song Toby had written for her but never recorded. That discovery alone showed that Toby's music wasn't only for the world. Sometimes it was just for the people he loved the most. Beside the guitars was a small workbench covered in tools, nuts, bolts, and grease-stained rags. Friends say Toby loved working with his hands, fixing old motorcycles, repairing vintage cars, even building things from scratch. In one corner sat a Harley-Davidson, not the kind he showed off publicly, but one that was halfway restored. It seemed he had been working on it in his final months, leaving behind unfinished work, a symbol of the life he lived, always building, always creating, never sitting still. His garage wasn't about wealth or vanity. It was about passion, craft, and the quiet joy of working on something real. But then, there were the boxes. Stacked neatly against the back wall, each labeled in Toby's handwriting, they contained years of memories. Old photographs, fan letters, and even childhood keepsakes. One box in particular held his very first cowboy boots, scuffed and too small to fit a grown man, but preserved as a reminder of where it all began. Another box contained letters from soldiers overseas who thanked Toby for giving them strength through his songs. Some were written on worn-out paper, stained with sand and sweat, carried across deserts before finding their way back to him. His family realized in that moment that Toby never threw away those letters. He kept them all, tucked away as priceless treasures. For his fans, Toby Keith was a larger-than-life figure. But in his garage, he was just a man holding on to the things that truly mattered: love, family, memories, and the gratitude of those who found hope in his music. And as his family sorted through those memories, they began to realize that this garage wasn't simply storage. It was Toby's heart, hidden in plain sight. As the family dug deeper into Toby Keith's garage, they began uncovering things that no one expected. Tucked away behind a dusty set of shelves was an old military trunk, its paint chipped and its lock rusted with age. At first, they thought it might have just been for tools or old clothing, but when they pried it open, what they found inside left everyone in stunned silence. The trunk was filled with letters, medals, and photographs, not of Toby himself, but of soldiers and veterans he had personally helped over the years. Some letters were written by families of fallen soldiers, thanking him for showing up at memorial services without any cameras or press. Few people knew it, but Toby had quietly visited military bases, hospitals, and grieving families for decades, never seeking recognition. The medals weren't his, but ones gifted to him by service members who felt his music carried them through the hardest times. For the first time, his family saw just how deep his private commitment to the troops went. It wasn't just about patriotic songs or concerts. He lived it every single day. And then there was a small leather-bound journal. Unlike the polished lyrics he published, this journal contained his raw, handwritten thoughts. Page after page revealed a side of Toby the world rarely saw: vulnerable, reflective, deeply human. He wrote about his fears, his struggles with illness, and the pain of leaving his loved ones behind. One heartbreaking entry simply read, "If my songs stop playing when I'm gone, let my family know. They were always the real reason I sang." His wife, Loretta, reportedly couldn't even finish reading that page without breaking down, because it showed just how much Toby carried on his heart without ever saying it out loud. But perhaps the most shocking discovery wasn't in a box or on a shelf. It was hidden in plain sight. Behind a tarp in the corner, they found a large canvas covered in paint. Few people knew this, but Toby had been painting in his final years, quietly expressing himself through art. The painting depicted a small farmhouse, surrounded by golden fields, with a man standing on the porch looking out into the horizon. It was simple but hauntingly beautiful. His daughter later said, "That was Dad's way of saying goodbye." The garage wasn't just a collection of things. It was a reflection of a man who gave so much of himself to the world, yet kept his deepest truths tucked away, revealed only when it was too late. For his family, every box, every note, and every hidden object told a story they had never fully heard before. And each discovery made them realize just how much Toby Keith meant, not only to them, but to millions of people he quietly touched throughout his life. As the hours passed, the garage began to feel less like a storage space and more like a living museum of Toby Keith's soul. Every corner held another piece of the man the world thought they knew. Yet it was clear there was so much more beneath the surface. Near the back wall, hidden under a stack of old moving blankets, the family discovered a large cedar chest. Inside, they found what could only be described as Toby's private time capsule. There were birthday cards his children had made when they were little, complete with stick figure drawings of their dad holding a guitar. There were ticket stubs from concerts he had attended as a young man, reminders of when he was just another dreamer in the crowd, long before fame came knocking. There was even an old cassette tape, its label faded, but when they played it, they realized it was Toby's very first demo recording. The sound was rough, the guitar slightly out of tune, but his voice was unmistakable. Hearing it now, in the wake of his passing, felt like he was speaking directly from the past, reminding them of where it all began. But the discoveries weren't just about his music. Hidden in a weathered envelope were letters Toby had written, but never sent. Some were addressed to old friends he had lost touch with, others to his parents who had passed before him. One letter in particular was addressed to his fans. It was unfinished, but his words carried weight. "If the day comes when I'm no longer here, don't cry for me. Celebrate the songs, the laughs, the good times. That's how I want to be remembered. Reading those words now, after his passing, was like hearing Toby give his own farewell, one final message of gratitude and strength. And then came something truly unexpected, an entire wall dedicated to photographs that had never been shared publicly. They weren't staged, glamorous images. They were raw snapshots of real life. Toby fishing with his kids, grilling in the backyard, sitting quietly with Loretta on the porch swing. These moments revealed the side of him that fame never captured. For all his success, Toby's greatest pride was always being a husband, a father, a friend. His family realized that this was the legacy he wanted to leave behind, not the awards or the record sales, but the simple joy of a life lived with love and authenticity. The garage was supposed to be a private place, but as the family uncovered each memory, it became clear that it was also a mirror, a reflection of the man behind the music, stripped of fame and stage lights. And in that quiet, dusty room, they began to understand that Toby Keith's true story was far more powerful than the world had ever imagined. As the family reached the final corner of the garage, the air grew heavy with emotion. They had already unearthed so many memories, letters, journals, photographs, even paintings. But what they found next was something that no one expected, something that tied Toby's entire life together in a single, unforgettable way. Behind a row of dusty storage bins stood an old wooden cabinet. It looked ordinary, almost forgotten, but when they opened it, the sight took their breath away. Inside were dozens of neatly organized binders, each filled with sheet music and handwritten lyrics. Some were songs the world already knew, classics like Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue and Should Have Been a Cowboy, but many were songs no one had ever seen before. Unfinished verses, melodies scribbled in haste, and heartfelt poems about life, love, and loss. These were Toby's private songs, the ones he never shared publicly, perhaps saving them for a day that never came. His family knew immediately that they were holding pieces of his soul, messages meant to outlive him. In one binder, marked simply with the words, "For them," they found lyrics dedicated to his children and grandchildren. The words were raw, unpolished, but deeply moving, reflections on fatherhood, the pride of watching his family grow, and the bittersweet reality of not being able to stay forever. In another, marked America, were verses that showed his enduring love for his country, words he hadn't yet turned into songs, but ones that spoke to the same patriotism that defined his career. These weren't just drafts. They were a roadmap to Toby's heart. But the most powerful discovery came in the smallest form. Tucked inside a leather notebook, there was a single page with just a few lines written on it. "One day they'll open this place and wonder who I really was. Let these words, these memories tell them the truth. I was a husband, a father, a friend." And that was more than enough. In that moment, his family realized the garage wasn't just storage, it was Toby's sanctuary. A place where he kept his truest self hidden from the world, waiting for the day when the people he loved most would finally understand. Every tool, every letter, every photograph was a part of a larger story, a story of a man who gave everything he had, not just on the stage, but in the quiet, everyday moments that defined him. When the family finally stepped out of the garage, the sun was setting, casting golden light across the driveway. They held those memories close, knowing that while Toby Keith may have left this world, the treasures inside that garage would ensure his spirit would live on forever. Fans around the globe might remember the superstar, the performer, the legend. But his family would always remember the man who left his truest self behind in that simple, unassuming garage. And in the end, that was Toby Keith's greatest legacy. Not just the songs he sang, but the love, humility, and humanity he carried in every moment of his life.